In December of 1823, Baron Friedrich von Hallberg made an announcement that stunned even the cruelest plantation owners of St. Charles Parish, Louisiana. On Christmas morning, he publicly accepted an enslaved woman delivered to his estate as a gift. She was 22 years old, listed at $900, barefoot in winter, wrists bound with red ribbon instead of rope. But when she looked at him, the Baron froze. The white society of Louisiana whispered about impropriety, madness, and indulgence. But they had no idea the woman kneeling before him had been born in the same house, to the same father. By the following spring, 3 men would be dead, a plantation chapel would burn, and the Hallberg name would vanish from parish records. What really happened inside that house? What did the enslaved woman do that terrified everyone who witnessed it? Before we uncover the disturbing truth, subscribe, hit the bell, and comment your state below. Now let me take you back to where it all began. In December of 1823, the Hallberg estate appeared untouched by the world that pressed in around it, as if the land itself had agreed to keep its secrets. The Mississippi bent there, slowing, darkening, carrying silt and whispers from upriver plantations. Spanish moss draped the live oaks in long gray strands, hanging like funeral cloth over a grave that had never been marked. Even in daylight, the house seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Stone walls weathered from European design, narrow windows meant to defend rather than welcome, iron balconies blackened by decades of humidity and rust. Baron Friedrich von Hallberg stood alone on the eastern balcony that morning, hands folded behind his back, watching frost evaporate from the ground as the sun climbed. He had been awake since before dawn, though he could not have said why. Sleep had left him early and without ceremony, abandoning him to the creak of old beams and the distant sound of chains being lifted in the yard. He was 43 years old, tall, spare, his blonde hair already threaded with gray at the temples. The planters of St. Charles Parish described him as restrained. The enslaved people used a different word: distant. Friedrich did not shout. He did not drink to excess. He did not beat for spectacle. His authority lived in ledgers, in schedules, in the quiet certainty that disobedience would be noted and remembered. He ran the plantation the way a banker ran a vault, cold, methodical, sealed. What the parish rarely discussed was that Friedrich had inherited more than land. The Hallberg estate had not been built for Louisiana. Its stone foundation had been shipped piece by piece from Europe by Friedrich's father, Wilhelm von Hallberg, a man who believed permanence was something you could order if you paid enough. Wilhelm had arrived in the territory with money, titles that meant little outside of Europe, and a private history that never appeared in the parish registry. He built the house first, before the fields, before the quarters. He built it as one builds a fortress against memory. Inside, the house smelled of beeswax, old paper, and damp stone. Portraits lined the central corridor, men in dark coats, women with pale throats and severe eyes, each gaze fixed forward, each mouth closed around whatever truth it carried. The servants moved quietly through those halls, their steps softened by rugs imported at great cost. They knew where not to linger. They knew which doors remained locked year-round. Friedrich passed the study without entering. He had not opened his father's desk in years. There were documents there, old correspondences, plantation accounts, baptismal records copied in careful ink. The past was arranged neatly behind drawers and locks. He had no reason, he told himself, to disturb it. Outside, the plantation was already awake. Smoke rose from the quarters. The sound of iron tools striking stone echoed faintly. Winter did not halt labor, it only made it quieter. Overseers moved between rows, coats pulled tight, breath visible. The enslaved people worked with practiced rhythm, eyes down, bodies remembering motions learned long before Friedrich had taken control. He believed order was mercy. That belief had served him well. Under his management, profits were steady. There were fewer public punishments, fewer runaways. Parish officials pointed to Hallberg as an example of proper governance. He accepted the praise with polite disinterest. Reputation, like land, was something to be maintained. What Friedrich did not know, what he could not have known as he watched the yard below, was that the house itself had been waiting. That stone remembered hands that built it. That walls held voices long after they fell silent. A carriage rolled into the drive just after sunrise, wheels crunching over frost-hardened gravel. Friedrich turned, irritation flickering briefly across his face. No deliveries were scheduled. Christmas week was meant for inventory and quiet observance, not surprises. The overseer hurried forward, hat in hand. His expression was unsettled. "There's a matter, sir." Friedrich said nothing. Silence was his way of forcing truth to surface on its own. A wagon arrived before dawn. From New Orleans. And a person was delivered. That word, person, hung awkwardly between them. Delivered by whom? The overseer hesitated. Papers were sealed. Payment already rendered. Friedrich's gaze moved back toward the drive, where the wagon now stood empty. He noticed, then, a figure kneeling beneath the eastern balcony, partially hidden by shadow. A woman, barefoot on frozen ground. Her wrists were bound, not with rope but with red ribbon, the color stark against her skin. The overseer continued speaking, words tumbling faster now. It appears to be a Christmas transfer. A gift of sorts. A gift. Friedrich stepped forward until he could see her clearly. She did not bow her head. She did not avert her eyes. She knelt straight-backed, chin lifted, as though the posture were chosen rather than enforced. Something tightened in his chest, sudden and unwelcome. "What is her name?" he asked. "Eliza," the overseer said. "Eliza May Carter." "And her origin?" "Born on a plantation outside Baton Rouge. Age 22. Valued at $900. Friedrich studied her face. There was nothing extraordinary at first glance. Brown hair pulled back neatly. Skin lighter than most in the quarters. Eyes steady. Too steady. What he did not know, the narrator would later record, was that the house had already recognized her. Friedrich descended the steps slowly, boots striking stone in a measured rhythm. He stopped a few feet from where she knelt. "Look at me," he said. She already was. And in that moment, brief, electric, impossible, both of them felt it. A sense of collision. Of paths crossing that had been separated by design rather than chance. None of them knew yet what this meant. None of them understood what had been delivered with that woman besides flesh and bone. But the house knew. And it had been waiting for her to come home. They brought her inside just before noon, when the frost had finally surrendered to thin sunlight and the yard smelled of damp earth and iron. Two servants led the way, careful not to touch her more than necessary, as though she carried a charge that might pass through skin. Eliza walked between them without resistance, her bare feet leaving faint wet prints on the stone floor that vanished as quickly as they appeared. The house reacted to her presence in ways no one remarked aloud. A door down the corridor groaned open without being touched. A candle guttered and steadied. Dust lifted where no footfall had disturbed it. The servants noticed these things and said nothing. Silence had kept them alive longer than speech ever could. They stopped at the blue room on the south side of the house. It had once belonged to Friedrich's mother, though he rarely allowed himself to think of it that way. The walls were painted a soft, faded indigo. Heavy curtains filtered the light. A narrow bed sat beneath a window that looked toward the river, as if the room itself were waiting for escape. "You will remain here," one of the servants said, "until instructed otherwise." Eliza nodded. "Yes." "No, sir." No fear in the word. Just acknowledgement. When the door closed behind them, she stood still, listening. The house breathed around her, wood expanding, stone settling, distant voices passing like weather. She crossed the room slowly, fingertips brushing the carved dresser. The pattern beneath her hand was familiar. She did not yet know why. She sat on the edge of the bed and removed the ribbon from her wrists. The skin beneath was unbroken. She folded the ribbon carefully and placed it in the drawer, beneath neatly stacked linens that smelled faintly of lavender and age. Then she stood and went to the window. From there she could see the quarters. Smoke rose in thin lines. People moved with practiced efficiency. Somewhere below, a child laughed, the sound quickly hushed. Eliza closed her eyes and counted her breaths. This was not the first house she had been brought to. It was the first that felt like it had been holding its breath for her. Downstairs, the servants gathered near the kitchen, voices low. "She's not like the others," one whispered. "They never are at first," another replied. "No, this one, she looks like him." That thought moved among them quietly, dangerous and unspoken. Similarities were noticed in whispers and punished in daylight. No one wanted to be the one who said it aloud. Friedrich remained in his study longer than intended, staring at a ledger without seeing the numbers. Eliza May Carter. The name repeated itself in his mind with an insistence that irritated him. He had approved hundreds of transfers, thousands of entries. None had followed him into silence the way this one had. He rang for Father Klein just after midday. The priest arrived an hour later, cheeks red from the cold, cassock dusted with road grit. He removed his hat, glanced toward the staircase, then back at Friedrich. "I was told there was an unusual matter." "Yes." Friedrich poured brandy for them both. Did not offer sugar. "She was delivered this morning. With sealed papers." "And you have not opened them?" "I have read them," Friedrich said. They are complete. And incomplete. Father Klein raised an eyebrow. There is no record of the sender. That alone is troubling. There is more. Friedrich hesitated. Words arranged themselves carefully in his mind as they always did. She has been placed in the main house. The priest's expression shifted. Surprise, then concern, then calculation. That will not go unnoticed. I am aware. Father Klein leaned back, studying him. Why? Friedrich did not answer immediately. He thought of her eyes. Too steady. Too knowing. I have not yet determined that. Above them, Eliza listened to footsteps past the door. She could tell who walked by the weight of their steps. She could tell who avoided her room entirely. She opened the drawer and removed the ribbon again, rolling it between her fingers. What she did not know was that in the study below, Friedrich was asking questions he had avoided for 20 years. What he did not know was that Eliza had memorized the answers long ago. That evening she was brought down to serve supper. The table was set for 6, though only 4 chairs were occupied. 2 remained empty, habit more than necessity. Eliza moved quietly, setting plates, pouring wine. She felt eyes on her constantly, measuring, comparing. She kept her gaze down until Friedrich spoke. What is your surname? The room stilled. I was told not to use it. Told by whom? The woman who raised me. And who was that? My mother. A faint smile touched her lips. Gone as quickly as it appeared. Father Klein watched her closely now. You can read, he said, not a question. Yes. You can write. Yes. That is uncommon. My mother believed ignorance was another kind of chain. Friedrich's fingers tightened around his fork. You will be instructed in your duties, he said. You will follow them. Yes. The word carried no submission. Only patience. As the meal continued, the servants noticed something else. Eliza served Friedrich last always. Not from defiance. From instinct. As though some order older than any of them had already been set. That night, as candles were extinguished and the house settled into uneasy quiet, Eliza lay awake in the blue room, staring at the ceiling. She counted the beams. She remembered them. And somewhere in the house, Friedrich dreamed of a corridor with one door missing, light spilling through an opening that had never existed before. The past did not announce itself when it returned. It arrived the way rot does, quietly, patiently, hidden beneath polish and habit until one day the structure could no longer pretend it was sound. Wilhelm von Hallberg had been dead for nearly 20 years, yet his presence still governed the house. His portrait hung at the far end of the corridor outside the study, a tall man rendered in dark oils, eyes sharp, mouth set in permanent judgment. Visitors mistook the severity for discipline. Those who had lived under him knew better. Wilhelm believed order was something extracted, not maintained. He had arrived in Louisiana in the spring of 1799, carrying letters of introduction, gold, and a conviction that the New World existed to be organized by men like him. The territory was loose then, still adjusting to new flags, new laws. Wilhelm found opportunity in that looseness. He bought land cheap. He bought people cheaper. He built the house before he planted the fields because a man needed somewhere solid to stand while he claimed everything else. Friedrich had been 11 when his father brought him into the study for the first time and showed him the ledgers. Everything is recorded, Wilhelm said. That is how chaos is defeated. He taught Friedrich to write a clean hand, to total columns without error, to see people as numbers that either added or subtracted from a final sum. What he did not teach, what he actively erased, were the spaces between entries, the lives reduced to margins, the names that never made it onto paper at all. It was during Friedrich's 17th year that Wilhelm committed the act that would eventually destroy them both. There was a woman then, enslaved, young, brought from the Carolinas. Her name appeared only once in the ledger, misspelled, and then never again. She worked in the main house. She was chosen for her quiet, for the way she moved without drawing attention, for her ability to disappear when commanded. She did not disappear well enough. What Wilhelm did to her was not unique. What followed was. She became pregnant. Wilhelm handled the matter efficiently. He moved her from the house to a distant property upriver. He altered records. He paid a midwife in silver to keep quiet. When the child was born, a girl, he ordered the infant sold within weeks. No name. No baptism. No record beyond a single line that Friedrich would one day notice had been scratched out and rewritten. The woman never returned to the estate. Years later, Friedrich would remember her face only as a blur of motion in corridors he had not yet learned to fear. At the time he had noticed nothing at all. That was Wilhelm's genius. He raised his son inside a world so carefully ordered that absence felt normal. Now, in December of 1823, Friedrich sat alone in the study long after midnight, candlelight trembling over the desk he had avoided for years. The drawer resisted when he pulled it open, wood swollen from humidity. Inside lay the old ledgers, bundled letters, sealed packets yellowed with age. He should not have been there. He knew that. Yet he continued. He found the birth registry beneath a stack of correspondence. His father's handwriting dominated the page, firm, precise. Friedrich scanned the entries, eyes moving automatically. Names, dates, locations. Then he saw it. A gap. Not an empty line. An altered one. The ink changed slightly. The pressure shifted. A name written then overwritten. The date matched the year he had turned 17. His pulse quickened. Above him, Eliza stood at the top of the stairs, barefoot again, listening. She knew that sound, the drawer opening. She had heard it once before, long ago, though she had not understood what it meant then. What Friedrich did not know was that Eliza had memorized that ledger from a copy her mother kept hidden beneath floorboards for years. Downstairs, Friedrich turned the page and found the letter. It was sealed with wax, the impression softened by time. The handwriting on the front was unmistakable. His mother's. He did not open it yet. Instead, he sat back, staring at the portrait of his father across the room. "You did not tell me," he said aloud. The portrait did not answer. In the quarters, whispers spread quickly and without names. The girl in the house. The way she spoke. The way the Baron watched her when he thought no one noticed. Some said she was trouble. Others said she was protection. No one agreed on which was more dangerous. That night, Father Klein prayed longer than usual. He remembered the woman Wilhelm had sent away years ago. Remembered the coin pressed into his palm for silence. He had taken it. He had told himself it was not his place to interfere. Now he wondered what it had cost him. Eliza lay awake in the blue room, hands folded on her chest, eyes open. She did not fear discovery. Fear had burned out of her years ago, replaced by something colder and more patient. She thought of her mother's voice, low and steady in the dark. "They will pretend not to see you. Make them look." Outside, the river moved slowly past the estate, carrying pieces of other lives, other crimes, south toward a sea that accepted everything and remembered nothing. Inside the house, a father's original sin had begun to surface. And none of them yet understood how much blood it would demand before it was satisfied. Christmas Day arrived without bells. No pealing from the chapel, no music carried on cold air. The Hallberg estate observed the holiday the way it observed everything else, quietly, efficiently, without joy. Labor was reduced, not ended. Meals were improved, not celebrated. Even prayer felt contractual. By noon, the dining room had been prepared. The long table was polished until the wood reflected candlelight like dark water. Silver had been laid out from the locked cabinet. Linen napkins, ironed flat, rested beside plates imported from France decades earlier. 2 chairs at the far end remained empty as they always did. No one questioned them anymore. Eliza entered last. She wore a simple gray dress provided by the house. Clean, well-fitted, deliberately plain. Her hair was pulled back neatly. She moved with measured steps, carrying a serving tray balanced easily on one hand. The room quieted as she crossed it, as though her presence altered the air. The guests were few but carefully chosen. A neighboring planter and his wife. The parish magistrate. Father Klein. Friedrich sat at the head of the table, posture straight, expression composed. Only his eyes betrayed him. They followed Eliza without permission. She served each guest in turn, eyes lowered, movements precise. When she reached Friedrich, she hesitated, only a fraction of a second, but enough. She met his gaze briefly, then placed his plate before him with deliberate care. Something passed between them. Recognition without understanding. A current that unsettled them both. The magistrate cleared his throat. "It is unusual," he said lightly, "to see new acquisitions presented so publicly." Friedrich lifted his glass. "She is house-trained." The word sat wrong in the room. Eliza stepped back, hands folded. She did not leave. "That was not my meaning," the magistrate continued. "Only that Christmas gifts are typically private." "I did not order her," Friedrich replied. A pause followed. Father Klein lowered his eyes to his plate. "Nonetheless," the planter's wife said, forcing a smile, "she is fortunate. The main house is warm." Eliza spoke before Friedrich could stop her. "It is." The single word, spoken softly, drew every gaze. The magistrate raised an eyebrow. "She speaks freely. She answers when addressed," Friedrich said. I was not addressing her. No, Eliza said calmly. You were speaking about me. Silence fell thick and immediate. Friedrich's knife paused midway to his plate. He felt heat rise behind his eyes, not anger, not quite. Something closer to fear. That will be enough, he said. Yes, Eliza replied. She inclined her head and stepped back, but the moment lingered like smoke. Dinner resumed, conversation strained. The planter spoke of crop yields. The magistrate mentioned new patrols upriver. Father Klein ate quietly, glancing at Eliza when he thought no one noticed. He saw intelligence there. And purpose. When dessert was served, Friedrich dismissed her. You may go. She hesitated again. There is something I must give you. Friedrich stiffened. Later. It concerns your family. The words landed hard. The guests looked between them, curiosity sharpening into interest. Later, Friedrich repeated, voice firm. Eliza held his gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded and turned away, exiting the room without another sound. The moment she left, conversation exploded. What was that? The planter hissed. You are inviting scrutiny, the magistrate warned. People notice these things. I manage my and Hallberg estate as I see fit, Friedrich said. As my father did. The name settled heavily. Father Klein set down his fork. Your father, he said carefully, managed many things. Friedrich did not respond. Later that night, after the guests had gone and the house had quieted, Friedrich stood outside the blue room. He raised his hand to knock. Lowered it. Raised it again. Inside, Eliza sat at the small writing desk by the window. A candle burned low. A folded paper rested beneath her fingers. You may enter, she said without turning. Friedrich opened the door slowly. She stood and held out the paper. My mother asked that this be given to you on Christmas Day. She said you would understand the timing. He took it without opening it. You should not provoke guests, he said. It is dangerous. So is silence, she replied. He looked at her then truly. The curve of her mouth. The line of her brow. Features he had seen reflected back at him his entire life. Who taught you to read? He asked. My mother. And who was your mother? Eliza's voice did not waver. She worked in this house. Friedrich's breath caught. When? Before your father sent her away. The room seemed to tilt. What is it you want? He asked. To be acknowledged, she said. First privately. Then publicly. That is not possible. She smiled faintly. It already is. She gestured to the paper in his hand. That letter, she continued, is not the only one. Friedrich stared at the door after he left her room, the folded paper burning against his palm. He did not open it yet. He could not. What none of them knew, what the house already understood, was that Christmas had not delivered a gift. It had delivered an accusation. And by morning, there would be no safe place left to hide it. Friedrich did not sleep. He sat in the study with the letter unopened on the desk before him, its presence exerting a weight disproportionate to its size. The candle burned low, wax pooling at the base like something melted under pressure. Outside, the house settled and sighed, old wood responding to cold. Somewhere beyond the windows, the river moved steadily south, indifferent. He told himself there were reasonable explanations. Forgery. Manipulation. A woman desperate enough to invent a story dangerous to everyone involved. He had seen worse schemes unravel under less scrutiny. This was no different. And yet he did not break the seal. What he did not know, what Eliza had known since childhood, was that the wax carried a flaw. A faint chip at the edge, made by a ring Wilhelm von Hallberg had worn until the day he died. A ring Friedrich himself now wore on his right hand. Just before dawn, Friedrich opened the letter. The paper crackled softly, sound magnified by the silence of the room. The handwriting was unmistakable. His mother's hand had been elegant, disciplined, every curve precise. She wrote as she had lived, controlled, economical, careful never to reveal more than necessary. My son, if you are reading this, then I have failed to keep the promise I made myself the night your father confessed his sin. Friedrich's breath caught. The room seemed to narrow. I am complicit. I did nothing when I should have done everything. The child born of that woman was innocent. Your father sold her as he sold livestock, and I allowed it because I feared the collapse of our name more than I feared God. The candle flickered. If the girl ever returns, it will not be by chance. It will be because truth has a way of surviving even the most careful men. Friedrich read the letter twice, then a third time. Each word cut cleanly, methodically dismantling the structure he had built his life upon. There was no signature. None was needed. By the time the sun rose, Friedrich understood one thing with terrible clarity. The letter was real. He locked it away and went to the window, watching light creep over the yard. The quarters stirred. Life resumed its rhythms. No one below knew what had shifted above them. Eliza did. She was already awake, seated at the writing desk, pen moving steadily across a page. She wrote quickly, without hesitation. When she finished, she folded the paper and placed it with two others inside a cloth bundle hidden beneath a loose floorboard. She replaced the board carefully, smoothing the rug back into place. She had learned long ago that evidence survived only when it was multiplied. Mid-morning brought visitors. The magistrate arrived unannounced, coat buttoned tight, expression tense. He did not wait to be offered a seat. "There are questions," he said. "From whom?" Friedrich asked. "From everyone." Friedrich folded his hands. "Be specific." "An enslaved woman in the main house. Allowed to speak at table. Seen walking corridors unsupervised. People are talking. People always talk. This is different." The magistrate leaned forward. "There are rumors about her origin." Friedrich felt the weight of the letter press against his ribs. "Rumors are not evidence." "No," the magistrate agreed. "But they are often close enough to frighten the wrong people." Outside the study door, Father Klein listened. He had come to warn Friedrich, but now he hesitated. He heard the magistrate's voice harden. "For your sake, Baron, I advise you to move her. Sell her. Remove the problem." Silence followed. "No," Friedrich said. The word surprised him with its certainty. The magistrate stared. "You are choosing this?" "I am choosing order," Friedrich replied, though the word tasted different now. After the magistrate left, Father Klein entered quietly. "You have read it?" he said. "Yes." "You know what this means?" "I know what it threatens." Father Klein shook his head. "No. You know what it demands." That afternoon, Friedrich summoned Eliza to the study. She entered without fear, eyes scanning the room, lingering briefly on the locked drawer. "You have read it?" she said. "Yes." "Then you know who I am." "I know what the letter claims." She stepped closer. "My mother kept copies. Of everything." He looked at her sharply. "Ledger entries. Letters. Baptism drafts that were never filed." Her voice was steady. "She taught me to read them before she taught me to read scripture." "Why come now?" he asked. "Why here?" "Because this house was built to hide me." Her gaze did not waver. "And I am done being hidden." Friedrich stood. "You understand what you are asking." "I understand what was taken." He studied her face, so like his own, now that he allowed himself to see it. "If this becomes public," he said slowly, "everything falls." She nodded. "Yes." "And you?" "I am already broken," she said softly. "You are the one deciding whether you will be." Outside, a shout rose from the yard. A sharp, sudden sound. Then another. They both turned toward the window. Neither of them knew yet that the overseer had been asking questions he should not have asked, and that someone, somewhere on the plantation, had decided silence was no longer enough. The shout in the yard resolved into movement. Men running, boots striking packed earth, a voice barking orders with an edge that cut through the cold. Friedrich crossed to the window in time to see the overseer, Thomas Reed, seize a young field hand by the collar and drag him toward the barn. The boy's cap fell. He bent to retrieve it and was struck for the hesitation. Eliza watched beside Friedrich, her face unreadable. "Reed has been restless," Friedrich said, more to himself than to her. "He knows," Eliza replied. "Knows what?" "That something has shifted." She turned from the window. Men like him feel it before they understand it. Below, the boy was released with a shove. Reed leaned close, said something Eliza could not hear, and pointed toward the house. The boy nodded rapidly and fled. Friedrich's jaw tightened. "Reed has no authority to." "He has always had authority," Eliza said gently. "He simply believes it belongs to him." That afternoon, whispers multiplied. In the quarters, names were spoken and withdrawn. Doors closed softly. A woman carrying water paused to listen, then moved on. Trust did not bloom. It assembled, piece by careful piece, the way a structure rises when each joint is tested before weight is added. Eliza went to the kitchen at dusk. She did not announce herself. She did not demand. She stood near the door until the cook, a woman with silver threading her hair and eyes that missed nothing, looked up. "You should not be here," the cook said. Eliza nodded. "I know. And yet." And yet, the cook wiped her hands on her apron. What do you want? Information, Eliza said. And time. The cook laughed softly without humor. Those cost more than money. I can pay, Eliza replied. In ways the house understands. The cook studied her, weighing. You look like him. I know. Silence stretched. What do you need? The cook asked finally. Who listens to read? Eliza said. And who does not? By nightfall she had a list. Not written. Memorized. Upstairs, Friedrich met with Father Klein again, this time with the door locked. She is organizing, the priest said. I can see it. Friedrich did not deny it. She believes truth is leverage. It is, Father Klein replied. But leverage snaps if pulled too quickly. Friedrich poured wine and did not offer it. If this spreads, the parish will intervene. They already are. The priest leaned forward. There is another matter. Reed has been asking about old records. Baptisms. Deaths. He asked me about a woman sent away years ago. Friedrich felt a chill that had nothing to do with winter. What did you say? That I remembered nothing. Pause. It was a lie, Father Klein added quietly. I know. Later that night, Eliza returned to the blue room and lifted the floorboard again. She added another page to the bundle, names, dates, fragments of conversations. She pressed the stack flat with her palm, as though calming something restless beneath the wood. She did not hear Reed approach until he was already at the door. He did not knock. You walk too freely, he said, stepping inside without permission. Eliza rose slowly. You enter rooms that are not yours. He smiled, thin and sharp. Everything here is mine. She did not move away from him. Then you should learn what you own. Reed's eyes flicked to the desk, the window, the door. He noticed details the way predators did. You think you're protected, he said. By him. I am protected by records, Eliza replied. His smile vanished. Careful. Careful is how I arrived here, she said. Alive. He leaned close, breath sour with wine. You make noise, girl, and noise brings consequences. So does silence, she answered. For a moment, neither moved. Then Reed stepped back. You will be sold, he said. Soon. Eliza met his gaze. You will not survive the sale. He laughed and left. She waited until his footsteps faded, then sat heavily on the bed, hands steady despite the tremor that moved through her chest. Fear had not returned, but something like anticipation had joined it. Downstairs, Friedrich stood in the corridor, having heard Reed's voice but not the words. He did not intervene. He knew better than to expose himself too early. What he did not know, what Eliza already understood, was that Reed had crossed from threat into inevitability. The following morning, a meeting took place in the far storage shed near the river, where damp mast sound and the smell of rot kept curiosity away. Eliza arrived alone. She was met by 3 people, the cook, a driver from the fields, and a man whose limp told a story no one asked him to repeat. We do not speak names, Eliza said. Only actions. The driver nodded. Reed watches us. He watches you, Eliza corrected. He does not see me. The man with the limp spoke. If we help you, we die. If you do nothing, Eliza said, you die slower. Silence. What is the plan? The cook asked. Eliza inhaled. To make the truth unavoidable. How? By placing it where even men like Reed cannot erase it. And when? Eliza looked toward the river, dark and patient. Soon. That night, Friedrich wrote for hours, drafting documents he never intended to file. He wrote wills, transfers, instructions that contradicted one another. He created confusion on paper because confusion, he had learned, bought time. When he finished, he burned the drafts and watched the ash curl and collapse. None of them knew how close Reed already was. By dawn, he would have proof enough to kill 4. And by the next sunset, someone would decide to act first. Reed's proof did not arrive as a confession. It arrived as paper. It was a scrap torn from an old account book, thin, brittle, ink faded to the color of dried blood. He had found it where no one expected anything to survive, beneath the false bottom of a storage chest that had belonged to Wilhelm von Hallberg. The chest had been moved to the barn years ago, forgotten under tack and rotting canvas. Reed did not forget things. He collected them. He held the scrap between 2 fingers as he walked toward the main house, coat open despite the cold, breath steaming in short bursts. His boots struck the frozen ground with confidence that bordered on triumph. What you got there? Asked one of the patrolmen near the gate. Something that buys me a better life than yours, Reed replied without slowing. The patrolman spat into the dirt. Careful. Paper don't stop a bullet. Reed smiled. Neither do you. By the time he reached the steps, the house servants had already begun to move differently, faster, tighter, like animals sensing a storm. Reed's reputation traveled ahead of him. So did Eliza's. He did not ask to be announced. He pushed into the corridor and called out in a voice that belonged on a whipping platform. Baron. Friedrich appeared at the far end of the hall, expression unreadable, hair combed back, cuffs crisp. If the man carried fear, he wore it the way he wore everything else, hidden beneath structure. You are loud, Friedrich said. Because I am correct, Reed answered. Eliza watched from the shadow of the stairwell, unseen. Her fingers pressed against the banister, nails pale. She had heard that tone before from men who believed they had discovered leverage. They never understood what leverage demanded in return. Reed stepped closer and lowered his voice, though not enough to be respectful. I know what she is. Friedrich's eyes flicked briefly toward the stairwell, then back to Reed. You know nothing you can prove. Reed's grin widened. He held up the scrap of paper. Friedrich's face changed, only slightly, but Eliza saw it. The tiniest tightening around the eyes. The brief loss of color. What is that? Friedrich asked, though he already knew. A line your father tried to bury, Reed said. A girl. Sold. No name. But the date matches. The mother's description matches. And the handwriting? That is Hallberg handwriting. Friedrich's voice remained steady. Give it to me. Reed laughed softly. Not for free. What do you want? Reed's eyes traveled up the corridor, taking in portraits, chandeliers, the thickness of wealth. I want what you have, he said. Or enough of it that I never answer to anyone again. Friedrich said nothing. Reed leaned closer, voice sharpening. I want a deed, lad. And I want her gone by the end of the week. Sold south, sent to hell, I do not care. But she leaves. From the stairwell, Eliza exhaled slowly. She felt something settle inside her, cold, clean, final. Reed had spoken the inevitable aloud. That was his mistake. Friedrich's reply came quiet. You are overreaching. No, Reed said, almost cheerful. I am finally reaching correctly. The corridor held its breath. Then Father Klein's voice appeared behind Friedrich like a shadow taking shape. Thomas Reed, the priest said, you should not be in this house. Reed turned, irritated. Priests should keep their mouths shut and their hands clean. Father Klein's gaze did not waver. You have never allowed either. The insult landed and Reed's face hardened. See. Reed snapped, turning back to Friedrich. Even your holy man knows. Everyone knows. You can buy silence, Baron, but you cannot buy time. Not anymore. Friedrich took one step forward. Leave. Reed's grin returned. When I have what I came for. He tucked the paper into his coat, slow and deliberate, then pivoted toward the door as if the meeting had ended on his terms. That was when Eliza moved. She descended the stairs without sound, crossing the corridor with a calm that looked like surrender to anyone watching too quickly. Reed turned as she approached, surprise flickering in his eyes. You should not be here, he said. Eliza stopped 3 feet from him. You should not have spoken your plan aloud. Reed laughed once. What you going to do, girl? Ask me nicely? Eliza held out her hand. Reed frowned. What is that? A trait, she said. Give me the paper. Or you will die with it in your pocket, she replied, voice steady as stone. For a moment, the corridor went silent except for the distant clink of kitchen metal and the faint sigh of wind against shutters. Reed looked at Friedrich, expecting support, expecting the Baron to order Eliza back into place. Friedrich did not move. That stillness was its own verdict. Reed's eyes narrowed. You think you can threaten me in my own world? Eliza's expression did not change. This is not your world, she said. It never was. Reed lunged. He moved fast, faster than most men his size, one hand shooting toward Eliza's throat. The motion was practiced. Violence as routine. Eliza stepped aside just enough that his fingers closed on air. And in the same movement, one clean, decisive motion, she drove the small blade from her sleeve upward beneath his ribs. There was no theatrical flourish. No scream. Just a sharp intake of breath, eyes widening as the body realized what the mind had not yet accepted. Reed staggered back, hand flying to his chest. His fingers came away wet. What? He tried to speak, but the word broke. He looked at Friedrich as if seeking permission to remain alive. Friedrich's face stayed still. Reed's knees buckled. He fell hard against the stone floor, the sound loud enough to make a servant cry out somewhere down the hall. Blood spread beneath him, dark and quick. Father Klein stepped forward, trembling. God forgive. Eliza cut him off with a look. God has been busy here for a long time. She knelt beside Reed, fingers swift, retrieving the paper from his coat before the blood could soak it. Reed's mouth moved soundlessly. His eyes fixed on her with disbelief, like a man watching his own world collapse. Eliza leaned close enough for only him to hear. You thought paper made you powerful, she whispered. Paper is only dangerous when someone is still afraid. Reed's eyes fluttered, then went still. For a long moment, no one moved. In the corridor, the portraits watched without expression. Finally, Friedrich spoke, voice low. No one will find him here. Father Klein stared at him. What have you done? Friedrich looked down at Reed's body, then at Eliza holding the blood-stained scrap as if it were a holy relic. What he did not know, the narrator would later say, was that the first death was not the end of the conspiracy. It was the beginning of the war. Eliza stood, smoothing her dress as though she had merely finished a chore. Now, she said quietly, we move before the house decides for us. And outside, in the cold morning light, men began to notice something missing. The overseer had not shouted orders. He had not walked the rows. And the silence he left behind was the kind that made even loyal men reach for weapons. They moved the body before the house could react. 2 servants appeared without being summoned, faces pale but resolved. No words were exchanged. Reed was lifted, heavy, uncooperative in death, and carried down the service corridor that led to the rear stair, the one Wilhelm had built for problems that required removal. Blood was wiped quickly, efficiently, as if the stone had learned the routine long ago. A rug was shifted. A candle relit. The corridor resumed its composed indifference. Only when Reed was gone did sound return to Friedrich's ears, the rush of his own blood, the distant lowing of cattle, the tick of the mantel clock counting out a future that had already changed. Father Klein sank into a chair, hands shaking. This cannot be hidden, he said. A man does not simply vanish. Men vanish all the time, Eliza replied. She placed the blood-stained scrap on the desk, smoothing it flat. Especially when they believe paper will save them. Friedrich stared at the scrap. He did not touch it. You planned this. I planned for him, Eliza said. Not for when. The priest closed his eyes. There will be questions. Yes, Eliza agreed. That is the point. She crossed to the window and opened it a fraction. Cold air cut the room, carrying the smell of river mud and smoke. By tonight, people will know Reed is missing. By morning, they will search. When they do, they will find what I want them to find. And what is that? Friedrich asked. Eliza turned back to him. The truth, arranged so it cannot be ignored. She reached into her dress and removed a folded document, cleaner than the scrap, written in a careful hand. She placed it beside the letter from Friedrich's mother. A copy of my baptism, she said. Drafted but never filed. Signed by Father Klein. The priest's eyes flew open. That was destroyed. No, Eliza said gently. It was hidden. By you. Father Klein swallowed. I was trying to protect. Yourself, she finished. I understand. Friedrich picked up the document. The handwriting was unmistakable. The date aligned. The names, one missing, one replaced, revealed more by absence than presence. Say it, Eliza said. Friedrich's voice came rough. You are my sister. Yes. The words settled into the room like ash after fire. My father. Used my mother, Eliza said. Then sold me. Then paid to forget. Friedrich closed his eyes. For a moment, the weight of inheritance pressed down with full force. Not land, not title, but consequence. When did you know? He asked. Always, Eliza replied. My mother told me when I was old enough to survive the knowledge. And you came here to destroy me. I came here to be recognized, she said. Destruction is optional. Father Klein looked between them, voice breaking. There are laws, he said. If this is made public. I know the laws, Eliza replied. I have studied them longer than you. She spread the papers across the desk. Copies, fragments, corroborations. Ledger entries Friedrich had just begun to notice. Letters his mother had written and never sent. Testimonies gathered quietly from people who had watched Wilhelm's house swallow a woman and pretend it had not. You cannot erase all of this, Eliza said. Not now. Friedrich sank into his chair. What do you want? He asked again, but now the question carried surrender. I want my name, Eliza said. And what was taken from my mother? That would mean that you lose everything, she finished. Publicly. Silence followed. Outside, a bell rang from the quarters, one sharp strike, then another. Someone had noticed Reed's absence. The house shivered as though anticipating judgment. Friedrich stood and crossed to the portrait of his father. He studied the painted eyes, the mouth so certain of its own authority. You built this on silence, Friedrich said softly, and silence has come to collect. He turned back to Eliza. There is another way, he said. A quieter one. Eliza's gaze hardened. I am done being quiet. Father Klein rose. If the parish learns. They will, Eliza said. Because I will make sure they do. She gathered the documents, bundling them carefully. By tomorrow night, she continued, copies will be beyond this house. In hands you cannot threaten. Friedrich nodded slowly. Then we have little time. Yes, Eliza agreed. And fewer choices. A servant appeared at the door, breathless. They're asking questions, he said. About Reed. Friedrich straightened, composure returning, not as denial but as resolve. Tell them Reed rode out early, he said. Tell them he was angry. Tell them nothing more. The servant nodded and vanished. Eliza moved toward the door. Prepare yourself, she said to Friedrich. Once the truth enters daylight, it burns. He watched her go, the echo of her footsteps sounding too much like his own. What none of them knew, what the house itself could not predict, was that the next revelation would not come from paper. It would come from fire. And it would take the chapel with it. The chapel sat at the edge of the cane fields, small and whitewashed, its steeple crooked from years of river wind. Wilhelm had ordered it built not from piety but from optics. A chapel suggested order. Order reassured investors. Inside, the pews were rough-hewn, the altar plain. Records were kept there, marriages, baptisms, deaths, copied neatly into ledgers that made lives official or erased them entirely. By dusk, men gathered there with lanterns and questions. They came because Reed had not returned, because his horse had been found tied and restless near the far road, because fear, once stirred, seeks confirmation in numbers. The magistrate arrived with 2 parish clerks. Father Klein stood near the altar, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles shone. Friedrich arrived last. He took his place in the front pew, face composed, coat buttoned, posture unyielding. Eliza stood at the back, hood drawn, unseen by most. She counted faces. She counted exits. The magistrate cleared his throat. We will begin with the register, he said. If Reed rode out, someone will have seen it recorded. Father Klein hesitated. Records are not always updated immediately. They will be tonight, the magistrate replied. We cannot have uncertainty. The clerks moved toward the altar, lifted the heavy book, and carried it to a table beneath the single chandelier. Pages were turned. Names read aloud. Dates confirmed. Eliza listened. She waited for the sound she had planned for. It came as a faint crack, so small most mistook it for settling wood. Then the smell arrived, sharp, unmistakable oil-fed flame. A shout rose from the back. Fire. The lantern near the side wall tipped as if nudged by accident. Oil spilled. A wick flared. The flame climbed the wall faster than anyone expected, racing along dry timber that had waited years for ignition. Panic erupted. Men surged toward the door. Someone knocked over a bench. Smoke thickened, biting at eyes and throats. The clerks dropped the ledger and lunged for it, hands blistering as pages began to curl and blacken. Father Klein shouted for order. No one listened. Eliza moved. She slipped forward through the chaos, reached the table, and seized the ledger as the clerks fell back. Smoke stung her eyes. Heat pressed against her skin. She tore free the pages she needed, 3 then 4, folding them quickly and tucking them into her bodice. The rest she let fall. The flames consumed them hungrily. Outside, bells clanged. Someone shouted for water. Buckets appeared too late, splashing uselessly against a fire that had found its purpose. Friedrich stood amid the smoke, watching the chapel burn. He did not shout. He did not move to stop it. He understood then that what burned was not evidence but permission. By the time the roof collapsed, Reed's absence had been forgotten. The fire demanded all attention. It became the explanation for everything that would follow. Later, when the embers cooled and the crowd thinned, Friedrich found Eliza near the river path. Soot streaked her face. Her hands shook, not from fear but from release. You destroyed records, he said. I rescued them, she replied, touching the papers hidden against her chest. They will say it was an accident. They always do. Father Klein joined them, face gray with smoke and grief. God forgive us. Eliza met his gaze. God has been watching. By morning, stories had formed. Reed had ridden out drunk. The chapel fire had been a tipped lantern. Tragedy, coincidence, misfortune. The parish accepted these explanations with relief. Truth was expensive. Lies were cheap and familiar. But the fire had done its work. Copies of the pages Eliza saved moved quickly, by boat, by carriage, by hand. They went to men who collected scandal like currency. To lawyers who understood bloodlines. To a newspaper editor in New Orleans who had lost a sister to silence and did not intend to lose another story. The magistrate returned to the estate that afternoon, eyes shadowed. "This must end," he told Friedrich. "Your house is becoming dangerous." Friedrich nodded. "It already is." "You will sell her," the magistrate insisted. "Or send her away." Quietly. Friedrich did not answer. Eliza stood in the doorway listening. She stepped forward. "I will leave," she said. The magistrate exhaled, relieved. "Good." "Not quietly," she continued. The relief vanished. "I will go with my name," Eliza said. "And with witnesses." Friedrich looked at her. For the first time, there was no calculation left in his eyes. Only choice. "I will sign what is required," he said. "All of it." Father Klein stared. "You will ruin yourself." "I was already ruined," Friedrich replied. "I simply did not know it." Outside, the river carried ash downstream. The chapel smoldered, its ruins stark against the pale sky. People passed it with lowered eyes, unwilling to meet the blackened beams that had once promised order. That night, Friedrich wrote until his fingers cramped. Deeds, transfers, affidavits. He signed them with a hand that did not tremble. He burned what could be burned and sealed what could not. Eliza watched from the threshold. "You are doing this because you fear exposure," she said. "No," Friedrich replied. "I am doing this because I recognize you." She nodded once. Acceptance, not forgiveness. By dawn, riders were on the road. By dusk, the parish would know. And somewhere between those hours, the Hallberg name would begin its final unraveling, pulled apart by fire, paper, and a woman who refused to remain a footnote. What none of them knew was how violently the house would resist being emptied. That reckoning was coming. And it would not be quiet. The house resisted first through sound. A shutter slammed where there was no wind. A door swelled in its frame and refused to open. Floorboards groaned as though weight pressed down from above, though the upper room stood empty. Friedrich noticed these things with a detached clarity, the way a man notices pain after the blade has already done its work. By mid-morning, riders arrived. They came singly at first, planters, cousins by marriage, men whose fortunes had brushed against the Hallbergs for decades without ever fully touching. They dismounted in the yard, boots crunching ash into gravel, eyes drawn again and again to the blackened silhouette of the chapel. Inside, Friedrich received them standing. "You have caused a disturbance," one said without greeting. "The disturbance has been here a long time," Friedrich replied. They spoke in lowered voices, circling the same demands. Silence, discretion, removal. Each man offered a version of protection that required obedience in return. Friedrich listened without interrupting. When they finished, he said only, "I will not sell her." The words landed hard. One of the men leaned forward. "You will destroy everything your father built." "My father destroyed it," Friedrich answered. "I am simply acknowledging the damage." A murmur rippled through the room. The men exchanged glances, calculation replacing outrage. "Then you leave us no choice," another said. Friedrich inclined his head. Neither did he. They departed with tight mouths and quick steps. By noon, the patrols doubled. By afternoon, the air around the estate felt charged, brittle, as though a single word might shatter it. Eliza spent the day preparing. She packed nothing unnecessary. Papers were wrapped in oilcloth, sealed twice, then hidden inside the lining of her cloak. She burned what could identify allies. She memorized routes. She rehearsed answers that would not be believed and truths that would be. At dusk, she went to the study. Friedrich stood at the desk, pen in hand, the final document waiting. He had aged visibly in a single day. Lines etched deeper around his mouth. His shoulders sloped, not from weakness, but from release. "This is the last," he said. She read it carefully. A declaration. Public. Irrevocable. It named her. It named him. It named Wilhelm and what he had done. It transferred property, acknowledged blood, surrendered authority. Once signed, there would be no quiet retreat. "You understand what this costs you," Eliza said. "Yes." And you understand what it gives me? Yes. She studied him for a long moment. Not as a brother. Not as a master. As a man standing at the edge of consequence. Why? She asked. Friedrich did not answer immediately. He looked around the study, the shelves, the desk, the chair where his father had once sat and taught him how to erase people with ink. Because, he said finally, I am tired of inheriting lies. He sighed. The scratch of pen against paper sounded louder than any shout. Outside voices rose. Lanterns flickered. The yard filled with men who had decided time had run out. Someone called Friedrich's name, sharp and urgent. They are coming, Eliza said. I know. He folded the document, sealed it, and pressed it into her hands. Go. And you? I will remain, he said. Someone must. She hesitated for the first time since she had arrived. They will not forgive you. Friedrich met her gaze. I am not asking them to. A stone struck a window. Glass shattered, scattering across the floor like ice. Now, Friedrich said. Eliza turned and moved through the house she had memorized in pieces, exiting through the rear passage as voices surged toward the front doors. She did not look back. Inside, Friedrich stepped into the corridor as the doors burst open. Men poured in, faces flushed, anger sharpened by fear. Where is she? Someone shouted. Friedrich stood alone beneath the portraits. She is gone. The blow came without warning. He fell hard, tasting blood. Hands seized him, dragged him upright. You will answer for this, a voice snarled. I already have, Friedrich said. They struck him again. And again. The house absorbed the sound, walls keeping faith with old habits. By the time they realized Eliza had escaped, it was too late. Riders thundered out in pursuit, but she had chosen her route well. She reached the river as night fell, a boat waiting where she had been promised it would be. As it pulled away, she watched the estate recede into darkness. A single window glowed briefly, then went dark. Years later, people would argue about what happened inside that house that night. Some said Friedrich was killed. Others said he was broken and sent north in disgrace. Records disagreed. Testimonies contradicted one another. Only one thing was certain. The Hallberg estate never recovered. And Eliza May von Hallberg never used that house's name again, except when she needed it to open doors that had once been sealed against her. What none of them knew yet was how far her name would travel, or how many other houses would burn quietly once it did. Morning arrived stripped of ceremony. Ash lay gray and uneven across the yard, tracked by boots that had come and gone through the night. The chapel smoldered into a shape that no longer suggested worship, just a ribcage of beams and a bell warped by heat, its tongue frozen mid-swing. Men spoke in hushed tones as they passed, as if sound itself might testify against them. Inside the house, Friedrich lay where they had left him. He came awake slowly, pain assembling in pieces, jaw, ribs, a dull throb behind the eyes. He tasted iron. When he tried to rise, his body refused. Someone had tied his hands loosely, not to restrain him but to remind him. The message was clear, remain. Voices filtered in from the corridor. They will blame the fire. They always do. And Reed? Gone. Rode out drunk, they say. Pause. Convenient. Friedrich closed his eyes and listened. He had spent a lifetime believing order could outlast truth. Now he understood the inverse. Truth endured because order depended on forgetting. By noon, the parish officials arrived again, not in anger but in administration. Papers were produced. Statements taken. Father Klein spoke carefully, his voice measured and precise, offering explanations that fit the shape of the moment. He did not lie outright. He simply allowed assumptions to do the work. When they asked for Eliza, Friedrich said nothing. When they asked for the documents, he said, "They have already left." That ended the questions. They did not kill him. Killing would have simplified the story, and the parish had learned to avoid simplicity when it threatened stability. Instead, they erased him. Within a week, Friedrich von Hallberg no longer appeared in ledgers. His title was marked vacant. His holdings transferred to distant relatives who had never visited the estate and never would. The house was shuttered. The quarters redistributed. Life rearranged itself around the absence. Some said Friedrich had been sent north under guard. Others said he had been confined to a private asylum. A few insisted he still lived in the house, wandering empty rooms like a caretaker for ghosts. No version held long enough to become official. The river did not care. Eliza traveled by night for the first stretch, then by daylight once the roads grew busier and safer in anonymity. She moved as someone accustomed to being unseen, choosing routes that braided together commerce and indifference. At each stop, she delivered what she carried with a precision that left no room for misinterpretation. A lawyer in New Orleans received copies first, enough to confirm lineage without exposing allies. A printer received fragments next, dates and names that suggested a story too large to suppress. Letters followed to men and women whose names had appeared only in margins until now. By the time the parish realized what had escaped them, it had already multiplied. Public acknowledgement did not arrive as justice often pretends to. There were no apologies issued by men with power. There were no sermons of repentance. What arrived instead were accommodations, settlements, quiet recognitions written into places that could not be unwritten without drawing attention. Eliza took what was owed and left the rest. She did not remain in New Orleans. She did not linger where her name carried weight that could become a trap. She traveled north, then farther, into cities where lineage was a currency traded alongside ambition and where silence had learned to wear new clothes. She used the name when necessary. She discarded it when it was not. Years later, a school opened with funds traced to an estate that no longer existed. A scholarship appeared in a ledger without explanation. A pamphlet circulated briefly, then vanished, its author unnamed. People noticed patterns and looked away. As for the Hallberg house, it resisted repurposing. Tenants complained of drafts where walls were solid, of footsteps in rooms they had locked, of papers misfiled and then returned to prominence overnight. After a time, no one tried again. The land was sold cheaply. The stone endured. Children dared one another to approach the ruins of the chapel and returned wide-eyed, swearing they heard a bell. Decades later, historians would debate what truly happened that winter. They would argue over fragments, whether Reed's death preceded the fire, whether the documents were authentic, whether Eliza's claim could be proven beyond doubt. They would footnote uncertainty and publish caveats. What they could not explain was how thoroughly the story refused burial. Every attempt to compress it, to reduce it to scandal or accident, failed. The truth did not roar. It accumulated. It seeped into places built to exclude it and soften them from within. In the end, there was no monument. Only absence where certainty had once stood. And a trail of small, deliberate changes. Names restored, records amended, doors opened a fraction wider than before, that suggested someone had passed through history with purpose and refused to leave it unchanged. The house remained. But it no longer decided what could be hidden. Time did what it always did in Louisiana. It covered things. Vines crawled up the stone walls of the Hallberg house and claimed them inch by inch. Rain found the cracks Wilhelm had ignored. Termites worked patiently where men once believed only iron mattered. The estate did not burn. It decayed, slowly, quietly, as though the land itself preferred erasure to spectacle. People stopped using the road that passed the ruins. Not by decree, by instinct. They said horses refused to step there. That lanterns dimmed without wind. That voices carried farther than they should, especially at dusk, when the river turned the color of old blood and the chapel's bell, long warped and fallen, seemed to breathe beneath the weeds. None of that ever appeared in records. What appeared instead were adjustments. A name corrected in a baptism registry years later, the ink darker than the rest. A property dispute quietly settled in favor of a woman whose lineage should have been impossible. A legal precedent cited once, then never again, involving inheritance where blood-crossed lines men insisted did not exist. Eliza May von Hallberg did not attach herself to these changes publicly. She understood something Wilhelm never had. Power survives best when it does not announce itself. She lived long enough to watch men argue about her. About whether she had been real, whether the documents had been altered, whether Friedrich von Hallberg had acted out of guilt or madness. Some historians suggested she had been a fabrication, an invention designed to embarrass a dead family that could no longer defend itself. Eliza never corrected them. She understood that denial was proof enough. What became of Friedrich was less debated because fewer people wanted the answer. His name appeared once more years later in a registry far north, listed among men without property or title. No cause of death. No family noted. After that, nothing. Some said Eliza had arranged his escape. Others said she had left him exactly where he belonged, inside the consequences of his own inheritance. The truth, like most truths that matter, resisted final shape. Father Klein died quietly, absolved by no one but himself. On his desk was found a single page of handwriting not his own, a copy of a baptism never filed. The page was unsigned. It did not need to be. As for the chapel, storms eventually flattened what fire had not finished. The bell was stolen for scrap. The foundation sank into mud. Children forgot what had stood there. Only the river remembered, carrying ash and names south the way it always had. But stories, unlike houses, are harder to empty. In parlors far from Louisiana, women told a version of it late at night, about a girl who returned to the house that sold her and took back something more dangerous than property. Men dismissed it as folklore. That dismissal was part of the story's survival, because the truth had never needed their permission. What Eliza did was not vengeance. Vengeance is loud. What she practiced was correction. She did not burn the world. She rearranged it just enough that it could no longer pretend it had been built cleanly. And that, more than fire or blood, is what frightened those who learned her name. Because it meant the past could walk back into any house and knock. What do you think Eliza May von Hallberg truly wanted? Justice, recognition, or something colder and more enduring? Do you believe Friedrich redeemed himself in the end, or was he simply too late? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. If you want more dark historical mysteries that expose the truths buried on purpose, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share this story with someone who believes history is never finished speaking. These stories were silenced for a reason. We tell them because silence never stays buried. See you in the next story.